This is the first time I've come to any form of conference in Canary Wharf, so I don't know how much cheering goes on normally. Or laughter. There's still some people next door. The coffee's still happening. They're coming in. There we go. Did everyone meet good people? Yes. You, sir, what's your name? Sachin, lovely to meet you. Sachin, did you meet some interesting people?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, well, imagine if you said no. It would be so awkward for the... No, I met 4 guys and their startups were ludicrous. Okay, that's good to hear. And there's... Sachin, what are you repping at the moment over here?
Angel investor.
You're an angel investor. Oh, nice. You're on the lookout for some nice little startups. Guys, so if anyone has got... What sort of things do you invest in?
Tech, early stage tech.
Early stage tech. Well, let's see if we can make something happen right now. Who here has got an early stage tech venture? Boom! All right. Do I get a cut? Or
From him or him?
well, okay. So, you're Marcus. Lovely to meet you.
Very nice to meet you.
Didn't say stand up, but you did it. It's nice.
Isn't it stand up?
So, Marcus, what does your startup do?
We create better networking experience.
Better networking experience. Look at that. I mean, you guys, at the end, you just had coffee, which is normally what people do to network, you know? So is it a new type of coffee for in-between events?
Even better.
Have I misunderstood something? What does your networking do?
We analyze all attendees beforehand by pulling information from your public LinkedIn profile, your Twitter feed, your company webpage.
Yeah.
And then we build a graph database from this, and then we connect people.
Should I tell you what? I don't know. Well, look here. You can Is you going to invest? Maybe. Amazing, guys. It's happening right now. Oh, we've got a bidding war. What's the name? Speer. By the way, that's actually how it's pronounced. It's not his accent. It's S-H-P-A-R-E. But by the way, I might be your first client to use that because I haven't done it today, but what my app does is nothing. But when it's up and running, people can join it. The audiences for my comedy show can join it. And then I look at their data online because before I just researched people in my audience to find out what they have. But my app is meant to see what people are online. And then there could be a couple in the audience. And you go, oh, you're a couple, but you've got more in common with him. You know, fun and creepy. But it sounds like a man, Mr. Speer, is already doing that, which is exciting. But anyway, enough of those, enough of the intermediation or something like that. That's a word I just learned. But we've got a panel now. Are we excited? Yeah. Damn straight we are. I will welcome onto the stage people who have just been in my pocket. It is a policy panel on what the UK can do to make all this tech into really, really work. So we have the moderator. Please get up for the moderator of the panel, Mr. Holloman. Then there is Mr. Mike Bracken. Oh, come on, guys. Marcus Stuttard, Simon Clark, and David White. There. I'd quite quickly like to do an apology to David White because he did put his hand up and say he was on the panel, and I told him he wasn't. Guess what? I was wrong. That's it. Oh, one other thing I was meant to announce is that if anyone from the press who does want to speak to these guys or any of the speakers afterwards in the press room, there is a little conference facility. So without any further ado, 5 amazing dudes.
Thank you and welcome to all the panelists. I think we should start off by maybe having you introduce yourself so the audience knows a bit about your background and give us some context to the conversation. Maybe start from the end over there.
That's me. Hi there, my name is David White. I'm the founder and CEO of a tech city-based startup called Import.io. I'm what I guess I would have to label myself as a serial entrepreneur because this isn't my first startup, and I think that qualifies you as a serial entrepreneur. Prior to that, I ran a company that's still doing very well that did some forensic investigation software. So that's the stuff that finds out about you guys. And prior to that, I was head of technology innovation for a bank called the Royal Bank of Scotland, which you may have heard of. That's me.
Hi, I'm Simon Clark. I'm a partner at Fidelty Growth Partners. Been investing in European tech for the last 13 years now. We've been really lucky. We've been able to back some great companies. We've made terrific returns. It was fun to see Eddie's presentation earlier because I think we're above that list. And before that, I had 3 years in a startup, going around raising money from VCs, building a business, panicking the website didn't work, taking the company public and having a $1 billion market cap. So it's been quite a ride.
Hi, I'm Marcus Stuttard. I'm the man from the Stock Exchange here today. I'm responsible for our UK markets at the Stock Exchange. So that includes AIM, our market for smaller companies. It includes the main market, so often people refer to that as, the FTSE, but also responsible now for the new high growth segment that we've launched this year, and the Chancellor celebrated the launch of yesterday. So here to talk about how the public markets can support your businesses.
Thank you. I'm Mike Bracken. I run the government's digital service, so I'm responsible for the digital provision of public services in the UK. I also run the technology, Centre of Technology and Government and the CTO office. As part of that, I've been an entrepreneur twice, had my own startup twice, done a variety of things and never thought I'd be presenting myself as a bureaucrat to this audience, but I am. And I'm here really to talk about how government is opening up and how I feel that people in this audience can engage better to take advantage of a whole supply chain that's probably been missing from the SME landscape.
Thank you very much for that. We have about 35 minutes to finish on time, 11:45. We're going to start out with a couple of quick questions. You can only answer yes or no. Yeah? Try that one. We're then going to move on to a couple of lengthier answers, and then we're going to move on to the normal length answer questions. To kick things off, if you had a tech startup, and David, for you, this might be an awkward question. If you had a tech startup or having a tech startup, would you choose London over any other city to run or create or build that business? Yes or no?
No.
Interesting. Well, yep.
Really has to be yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay, it depends. Does that count?
No, that's... No.
Yes.
Okay.
2 words. Absolutely yes.
Yes.
Interesting. The second question, is the government doing enough to support tech startups in London? Yes or no? We can start with Mike this time. Awkward question for you.
Yes.
I'm going to be greedy and say no.
Getting there. Yeah.
I would say yes.
The kind of ultimate goal of a startup could be an IPO or could be an acquisition. An IPO is indeed in the title of this session, so I think we should touch on that as well. Do you believe an IPO is the end-all and be-all for a tech startup? Yes or no?
No.
No. We can challenge that. We can have a much longer answer, but absolutely not.
No.
Maybe.
Brilliant. So that concludes the quick answers. We have some interesting coming out of that. We can kind of build on that. Now we're going to move on to the second batch of questions. Which will allow you to give a tweet-long answer. So 1 sentence. So again, we're talking about London. We're talking about building a company here and potentially doing an IPO in London. Does it matter where you build your company? Does it matter where you do your IPO? 1 sentence. 3 questions maybe? So that's a bigger challenge for you then to answer that in 1 sentence. I'm from Scandinavia. We combine questions into 1 long sentence.
Does it matter where you build your company? Not really. If you want to float where you float, it's not for me to say.
I've got a natural bias. I would say it really matters where you IPO your business.
You build your company where your customers are and where the talent is.
Absolutely agree. I think where you build your business is important, and you build it where the environment is most favorable to what you want to achieve, which includes IPO.
Thank you very much. No, so now we're going to move on to the normal length answers so that you can develop more freely your thoughts on the matter. And we have a Q&A sort of scheduled towards the end, but I'd like to encourage all of you to raise your hands throughout the conversation, and we can have the Q&A on the fly as and when you think of things you might want to challenge or disagree with or maybe even agree with. And also between the panelists, feel free to challenge others' opinions so we get a bit of a fight up here, hopefully to your benefit, a bit more entertaining, hopefully. So we're having this conversation today, why build a company in London? Is there a better place to do it? Why are we asking ourselves this question? It's obviously not obvious to build a company in London or to do an IPO in London. Is there anything broken? What is broken in the system today?
I think, again, there are two questions there. I think the IPO in London question is one that you can look at is clearly an issue, and that's why we've seen action happen. I mean, there wasn't, I think 2010 Mail.ru was the last tech company to IPO, and that compared to the US, that's obviously a different scenario. I think with regards to London as a place to start a business, first of all, I think it depends on the type of business you are. I think if you're a media or fashion business, it's probably more obvious to start it here. Having started a fintech company, it made sense to start it here or New York, because again, it comes back to the point around customers. You want to be close to your customers, and starting a fintech company in the Valley can feel like you're a little bit away from your customer base. I think certainly in the more general sense of starting a tech company in London, the question's more around become a comparison, and I've spoken before about, I don't think the comparison with the Bay Area, with Silicon Valley is necessarily useful. I think we need to really focus on creating the right environment and learning from other clusters, because there are plenty of other clusters out there. But I think it is, the question is a valid one as to why London, particularly around IPO. But on a more general sense, I think it's a good city to start a business, maybe not the best city to start a tech business.
Any other comments to develop on that?
I don't have a huge amount to add. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's about finding customers, it's about building a business, about creating value, because you've been able to get some of the smartest people to tackle real problems. So that's the heart of building a company. Marcus and his team deserve huge credit for opening up the market, the public market, for the really high growth companies, because there has been an issue, and actually, Rohan talked about this earlier. The early stage investing problem is by and large, and somebody can throw things at me if you disagree, but by and large solved. A half-decent company here that has a half-decent idea can raise early stage money now. The growth capital bit, people like us are doing growth capital, and I have got a lot more competitors than I used to, so I'd like to think that that's being solved. But the real public capital for building out the business once it's successful and becoming a global company, that was an issue, and things like the high growth segment, I think, are going a long way to tackling that.
Yeah, just to take sort of half a step back. I agree absolutely about the startup scene. When I said earlier, has the government done enough? No, but that's because life continues, and there are always going to be new challenges. So let's not rest on our laurels. We need to continue to push forward. I think there are some real perception issues in the UK, and I think there's a real need for education. I completely agreed with the comment earlier about the vicarage or the rectory effect in the UK. I was talking to a very well-known business angel last week at an event similar to this, and he had an interesting thought on that and said, is it the entrepreneurs or is it the entrepreneurs' wives that cause that problem? But there's I think we have got some challenges, and what we're trying to do at the Exchange is to make building businesses of scale an aspiration again, and to give people confidence that it can be done, because we often come up against this perception that the London markets won't support technology businesses. We've got over 300 technology businesses in the UK. We had over probably about 10 that joined AIM last year. Companies like OneDisco, $6 million revenue, market value of 170 million, increased by 300% last year. So investors are willing to support. They've got money. And I think we have got a really good set of foundations for the next generation of tech and growth businesses.
Sorry, I know this is way over 140 characters, but I just want to take the vicarage point for a second, because one of the ways that people like us can help there is actually giving a little bit of liquidity to founders. Because if you've been working for 5 or 6 years and you've been drawing a pathetic salary and your husband or wife or significant other is starting to get pretty upset, actually being able to take £1 million home does make a difference and allows you to go for growth and allows you to build a business. And I'm a big believer that that can actually help build a much bigger company.
You want to develop on that? Or
Not really, no.
everyone does not need to say anything on all the questions. That's perfectly fine. So I'm still going to dwell on London being a good or bad place or ideal place to be when setting up a startup. And we've already heard from the panel that there's some disagreement whether or not London is the best place. So I saw a ranking, I'm sure this has changed and depending on who you ask, on office rent costs in the world. And I think West End was number 1, Tokyo number 2, London City number 3. So like top 3 countries or cities in the world, London gets 2 of those top positions. So it's very expensive, obviously, to get offices here. And also salaries are very high. I'm from Sweden, as we've touched on, Scandinavia, where people get less money, but still manage to build big businesses like Skype, Spotify, etc. Rent costs and salaries, very high in London. What are your thoughts on that, and how should tech companies address that or get around that? Or Yep.
So London is expensive. I think that's a reality. It's expensive to do business here. It's expensive to live here. And salaries I'll touch on because I think salaries really depends on the sector. Certainly if you're building a true high-tech company, i.e. you're having to deploy large numbers of back-end developers, London's a lot cheaper than the Valley, a lot cheaper. But I think that just touching on the rent problem, I was around at the start of sort of seeing this cluster, first of all, be named the Silicon Roundabout, which is really unfortunate that name stuck. If anybody who hasn't been to the Old Street Roundabout, please go and visit it. It is one of our top tourist attractions. So I think, the great thing about that is, as an entrepreneur, we have a network of support. It's a cluster, all the benefits go with that. The evil downside of that is landlords push the rents up because there's more demand. And that is a real problem, and we're currently in a situation of expanding, which is great, and then facing the reality of expansion, which is how do we get office space at a price that is not prohibitive to our run rate, etc. And I don't think there's an easy way around that because it is a supply and demand issue. This is a city. It's not, geographically, it's not spread out as the Bay Area is, where you're spread out over a nice peninsula, and you can still be 30 miles away from San Francisco, but be inside the Silicon Valley area. So I think that is an issue, and I don't see, other than some interesting intervention, I don't see an easy way to avoid that scenario getting worse and worse, which is as more people see it as a cluster to help success, more people will pile in, and as such, the limited resource of space will carry on going up. So it will become a problem.
So, a couple of thoughts. The first is the emergence of the micro multinational, right? The company that happens to be based in London, and maybe 30, 40, 50 people in the business, but actually the development isn't all here. And that's very interesting. London has some obvious advantages there, if nothing else, time zone, and the ability to get to talent in all sorts of other countries. So just because you're a London-based startup doesn't mean all your employees are here. The second is there is, and I think your point's a very good one, there is an opportunity for a clever set of landlords to figure out that there's a lot more money here by not being grasping and by being long-term investors in and backers of entrepreneurship. We've seen this in other cities. I haven't yet seen a landlord figure this out in London. We'll see if that changes.
And I think London has got so many benefits, and it is a supply and demand thing. And being from the stock exchange, clearly, I believe very strongly in market forces. So, why are prices high? Well, because people want to be here. But it's not just about London. First of all, one of the big assets that London has is, we have got the really good mix of, technology, innovation, finance, creative industries, medical, all of those sectors exist, and quite often in little kind of villages or clusters, but all come together in ways that they don't in other global cities. But clearly, there's a lot going on around the UK. So Tech City last week organised an event where all I think 26 UK tech hubs came together, and there's amazing things happening all over the country. So it's not just about London. There are things, really exciting things happening right the way across the UK. So I think whilst London on a global stage has massive assets, we shouldn't overlook the fantastic things that are happening elsewhere.
Mike, maybe to you then. So what's the government doing to encourage and support high growth or small tech startups? I know you're kind of opening up, aren't you, for procurement?
Yeah, thanks for that. I'll just say a word on property. If you want any property, we disposed of an amount of property that would fill St James's Park last year. So if you're looking for any fine old Victoriana, which is pretty useless for Wi-Fi, we've got loads of it. In terms of what we're doing, thanks for asking the question. So my job, as I said, is to run digital services, and we're having to reform a lot of our internal processes. And Rohan will have talked this morning about what we've done, if you like, outside government. I'd just like to take a moment to take what we've done inside government. The UK government has a £6.5 billion supply chain for technology services. That's the central government, and it's a mere £16.5 billion for wider public sector. A parliamentary report in January last year described the supply chain of companies to those funds as an oligopoly, and pretty much we've been in the hands of a sort of 15-year culture of outsourcing, and that means that's had many repercussions, not least the fact that so many of the government assets and our services have really been locked into very large and long-term contracts. And while some of those companies have clearly got great technology skills, those contracts mitigate against bringing SMEs into the marketplace. So in the next 18 months, 80% of those contracts are up for renewal. And what we're doing in government is changing some quite Byzantine procurement procedures to encourage SMEs into the marketplace. And we've got about 30 or 40 in the last year who we point to. The conventional wisdom of the last sort of 10, 15 years has been that SMEs need to align themselves with a large organization, a systems integrator or a very large company, and that they will play a part in the supply chain. That is clearly difficult for many SMEs. I've run two. My last one, we had 330 clients, not one public sector client, simply because the sale and the cost of sale into the public sector was just too much for us to bear. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to make it easier to deal with government. And there's two things I'd like to point out really quickly. The first is something called G-Cloud, which is a government cloud store. And it's an opportunity for companies to register with government to provide effectively commodity-based, cloud-based services. It's not perfect yet. You still have to do some paperwork, and it's more of a catalogue than a sort of friction-free commission model, but we are working on it, and it will get there. We have version 3 coming out soon. And if you haven't registered on it, please take time to do so, because it's the simplest and quickest way to register to get on. And the second thing is something that will happen this summer, and I was explaining to Marcus before, we are at the mercies of European legislation here. But when government procures or commissions from groups of companies, and in this case, stables of companies like this, we do so through frameworks. And this summer we will have a new framework, which is an agile and digital procurement framework. I know it trips off the tongue, but it's aimed specifically at companies who will be here today and companies in this sector, because we are working very hard to get you into the government supply chain. We have to make public services in this country as digital, as attractive as all the stuff we all use in our personal lives, whether it be companies like services like Import.io, or whether they be retail services and buying a plane ticket or a book or anything else we do, public services should aspire to have that ease of use. And we can't do it with our current supply chain, and particularly our large contracts. So we're undertaking profound reform of that service and the way we engage with you, and we'd ask you to try and get on board with us via the G-Cloud and via the procurement framework that will follow this summer.
Thank you. I'm keen to involve you guys as well. So I'm going to ask one question, and then I'm going to see if there's any questions on the floor here. So start thinking about any questions you might want to ask. So we've heard what the government is doing in terms of changing some of the ways you do work and to open up. And we had a question in the beginning, is the government doing enough? So I want to ask that question to the three of you. We've heard now what the government is doing, some examples. There's been a number of kind of recent government changes, like the inclusion of IAM shares to the ISAs, the stamp duty being removed, etc. What else should the government be doing to improve things?
Speaking from an entrepreneur point of view, I think without a doubt the changes we've seen over the last 5 years have probably been one of the most progressive, if not the most progressive I've ever seen from a government to try and encourage entrepreneurship against a backdrop of a severe financial crisis, a severe economic crisis, which really helped to sort of reset everything. One of the problems coming from a financial services background, it was very easy to recruit. In 2005, I could go through the long list of Cambridge graduates and pick the one I fancied. Fortunately, that's changed, and more graduates are now going into entrepreneurship, partly because of the focus it has at the moment in the UK, which is great. So I think the government is doing a lot. You could always, and I think this is one of the downsides of the tech scene at the moment, you could always pick points in it. There are always, inevitably, governments suffer at times from being big and not always the most efficient they can be. But I think as a mindset, an ethos, and kind of, as Rohan talked about this morning, really getting in with things like G-Cloud and the procurement policy, eating your own dog food, taking that risk yourselves in the supply chain, that's great. I think there are things, there's particular areas where I think more can be done. I think helping small companies to employ people and making it easier for companies that are just on that, I'm first employee, going beyond the founders to really incentivize them to make that decision earlier would help with what I think is one of the most important things you could do as an entrepreneur, which is create jobs in the economy. So I think that's one area I would highlight that I'd like to see more done. But as an entrepreneur, it's rare that you look to a government to support you, but there's no doubt with all of the moves that have happened recently, you feel supported in trying to create a company.
Yeah, other comments on that? What's missing from the government?
So this has been a very entrepreneur-friendly government. And what's great is it's an entrepreneur-friendly climate. This isn't a partisan issue. All the political parties seem to be aligned around this, and there's a real energy here. And I speak as an American who's been here for a long time. There's real energy around supporting entrepreneurship, so that's terrific. But I do think the work that Mike and his team are doing around procurement actually is the biggest lever of all. Mike seems to fade. This is useless. And technology is having its day. Because procurement, unlike grants, unlike anything else, really drives innovation. And there's nothing like an intelligent government initiative to buy what a particular agency needs, which is innovation, which is something that's agile, something that's quick, something that deals with a real problem, and to go and look for the best. And the best is probably going to come from a startup. May not, but it probably is. And that's how you get companies to grow. It's no secret that autonomy, one of the big success stories here, grew on the back of a CIA contract. To get agencies here to be as nimble and as smart on procurement as the Americans have been in the past drives massive growth.
Marcus, final points on what governments can do differently.
So kind of speaking from a financial markets perspective, I just want to also echo the previous comments. I think what the government has done very well. Can you hear me at the back? Yeah, okay. The government has really listened to business and to entrepreneurs and have hosted a lot of events to get feedback. But what we have seen is a really joined up set of policies that go, from seed capital right through to mid caps to large caps. So there's been a really joined up set of thinking. From a financial markets perspective, the area where we still think there needs to be a little bit more focus is, regulators and policymakers from a financial markets and an investor protection point of view have over the last 10 years got themselves into a mindset that says small companies are high risk and the best way to protect investors, particularly individual investors, is to make it really hard for them to invest. Now, we can't have growth and have that kind of regulatory mindset. So, that there is still some detail to be worked out there, but, we're confident we'll get there.
Okay, and questions from the floor? Does anyone want to share anything you're thinking? In the back, is a woman in the back? Can you run over with the microphone, or can you speak really loud?
Hello? Okay. Sorry, I'll ask again. There's nobody else who's asking questions. Do you not think that starting up in London, the earlier part of the discussion, that a lot of firms, particularly within the tech sector, have a bit of myopia around what the market is for their services? They think London is representative, whereas London potentially, arguably, is a set of early adopters. And they're not really understanding what the massive potential is for their products or fully researching markets outside of London. They think they've just got it.
I mean, the short answer to that is no. I think, I meet a lot of entrepreneurs that are trying to build business inside London. I think inevitably every single one of them thinks about an international market. I say that with a bit of reservation because that tends to be the UK and the US. I think we still have a problem in not addressing Europe as a market, which is the myopia. I mean, I think that is a little bit silly considering it's a lot closer than flying to the States. But clearly, my experience almost always is that entrepreneurs are thinking about that international market. They're thinking about, I think we're more driven than our American counterparts to almost instantly think about where are the opportunities outside of London. I know in my first company, our second deal after trading for about 10 months was in the US, in New York. And we were out there almost immediately looking for business. I think I did a flight to Boston the first week we started the company because we already had started prospecting in the US. So I think we do look international. I think we look international pretty quickly. I think we could do a lot more to think about Europe as closer and somewhere we should go to earlier. But no, I think we're pretty good at that, actually.
Well, I'm happy to pile in and disagree as well. First of all, you'd build a company on early adopters. So finding the early adopters is absolutely essential to figure out what your product should be. I had a company in yesterday morning, 10 million euro business, a small company, growing very nicely. Half of its revenue came from Africa. And I thought that was just terrific. They built the business and then they'd gone to where the growth market was, which happened to be sub-Saharan Africa. This is a great place to build global businesses. You guys are in the right time zone.
Was it like an online water supply company, or?
It was not. It was a telco.
Bottled water?
It was a telco software business for high quality telco. The telecom networks in sub-Saharan Africa are in many ways much more sophisticated than the ones you have here.
I'm keen to get more questions from the floor. Yeah, one in the back.
Hi, I'm Jackie Taylor. I'm CEO of Flying Binary, and we're G-Cloud suppliers. And I very much appreciate everything that Mike said, and I would endorse that the government are actually doing everything they can. Procurement frameworks are great, and that's where innovation and growth is going to come from. But for every, it's like a 1 in 10 ratio for us as G-Cloud suppliers, although we can stand up a stack which will meet IR3, everything bar top secret requirements, in order to deliver in that game-changing way you're after. For every 10 we put in, we're only getting through the gate once. And the gatekeepers are not the procurement frameworks and not the initiatives you're doing. The gatekeepers are the technologists inside of government, that they don't understand what we do. And therefore, when they look at a cloud service, it's not that on-premise outsourced service. So certainly, I can't speak for all G-Cloud suppliers, but from my own company's point of view, if we can get some more help to get past those technology gatekeepers, which stop us getting through the evaluation process, because we can deliver and we can meet everything you've asked, but we just can't get past them.
Fair enough. I think that's dead right. All I'd say is, 6 months ago it was 0 out of 10, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I've come from a reasonable tech background into government to find a very, very mixed set of technology skills. And the biggest thing we have to do is reform an internal culture. And last month we migrated into the centre, into Cabinet Office. The central, we folded down the CIO structure, doesn't work. We folded the ICT profession, that phrase should tell you all you need to know. And we brought that into a digital centre. We have a lot of work to do. We have engineered ourselves into a position in the UK government in terms of technology. We engineered it deliberately. We started 15 years ago. It is going to take more than 6 months to sort that out. You're absolutely right. What I would say to you is, talk to us, let us get that number higher at 2 and 3 out of 10, and over time we are changing that culture. I think in June, July, when you see the newer procurement framework and a next version of the G-Cloud, I expect substantial improvements on that. But I have to say, this is a change that will, it is the life of this parliament. It won't happen overnight, because we have 8,500 people in central government in various procurement jobs. And many of those are making decisions, as you rightly say, around technology that that the market has moved a lot quicker than their understanding of technology. And we're here from the centre to try and help and sort that out.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
James Clark here from the BVCA. Possibly a slightly leading question, because I'll be talking about it later on. Marcus talked about the efforts that Tech City are making to try and expand the range of focus beyond London to the rest of the country by tech. I'm interested to find out what the government can do in terms of expanding the remit of tech beyond just tech, but into other industries. If we look at an environment like Cambridge, part of the success of it is it's not just one particular industry, it's ICT plus material sciences plus biosciences. So is there a role here for government to actually take a bigger part in this, trying to encourage tech companies to look beyond their own backyard into what they can do for other industries?
Well, I mean, I can't really speak on behalf of government, but what I would say is I don't think it is just down to government to do it. I think, going back to one of my earlier points, I think there's a big role for education and some really good case studies to come out to show actually, what fantastic clusters and technology there is all around the country. And again, showing my natural bias, I think one of the ways for a lot of these companies to really stand out is to consider using equity and a flotation to build up that profile and that credibility. Because, what is absolutely obvious is that when people talk about high-profile global technology companies, they're all public companies, because a listing gives that access to profile, visibility, to credibility. And I think, the more, not just London, but the more UK businesses that we can get to float, the more people will actually realise how fantastic UK technology is and the companies that we've got. And we really want to encourage those management teams, those entrepreneurs, to build businesses of scale and have the confidence to do that, rather than think actually their only option is to sell out early and be happy with the Rectory and the Aston Martin.
I'm a civil servant, so I can't give you a political answer, but I would say one thing that obviously pretty ambivalent about how companies proceed, whether it's to an IPO and so on and so forth. But one of the things, back to the earlier point, that we've seen time and again is a restriction on SMEs, is the fact that because of these procurement issues and these large contracts, many emergent companies are bought probably more quickly than they need to be by companies that hold large contracts. We did one deal with a company on Thursday. It was bought for a ridiculous cash multiple on the Monday. by the company that potentially it was going to disrupt. And one of the things we must do is actually allow companies or help companies retain a degree of independence and growth, whether it's to be IPO or somewhere else. I think it's in government's interest to do that. So if there are ideas about how we could do that, then I think we're interested to hear from them.
I'm conscious about time, and we want to get one more question in, so we might hold that thought for a little bit, if that's okay. So, Prue.
Hi, Prue Ashby, Tech City. I just wanted to make a couple of quick points. Firstly, Tech City is here to support the cluster and support the companies in it. So, David, I'd love to talk to you about your challenges around employing people after this session, and also what we're doing in terms of helping companies globalize their businesses and winning contracts overseas. So just wanted to make that point. Second point was about the property. What we have seen in the Tech City cluster is a plethora of incubation and co-working spaces being set up, which actually does make it very low cost to start your business. There's one company here called the Hoxton Mix. Matt is somewhere in the room. There he is. He started with his own business, sublet some desks, and now he's got like 3 buildings in Shoreditch, all supporting local companies. So I would just say, yes, London it is known to be expensive, but there are low-cost options for startups and growing companies. Thanks.
Just to reply on that, Prue, I absolutely agree. I think one of the great things about London is if you are at that point of starting, if there are 2, 3, 4 of you, it is incredibly easy to start the company, both at a legal level, etc. It is incredibly easy to get space, and it's incredibly easy to feel supported in that space. And that, outside of probably San Francisco, is pretty unique. I mean, I know a lot of people are following it now. We're seeing Berlin doing some great stuff, but it's great here. The problem comes when you get to 20, 30 people, and that's when you're no longer in that kind of security of having the community around you, but that's the critical stage. I mean, the point I was going to make, following on from Mike, is I think we do suffer a little bit from a lack of ambition on growing companies. It is very easy, if you're an entrepreneur that's built a company up to about 20 or 30 people, you've got maybe 5 to 10 million in revenue, a large US competitor comes along, offers you a big multiple, history shows and all the stats show, we jump. And we've got to remove that. It's not good for us. It's not good there are no Googles in the UK. I mean, autonomy, you could argue, got pretty much there, but even then, eventually they jumped out. But the reality is, these are all factors in affecting entrepreneurs when they're making those decisions. If you're finding it hard to grow the company, it's difficult to get the property, your costs are going up, you're not getting the backing maybe at the growth stage that you got at the early stage of access to capital. These are all factors that encourage you to get out early. And one of the biggest problems with entrepreneurship in the UK, in tech, because that's all I can speak of, is we jump early. We take the money, we go and buy a fast car, live in a house. And that's not good for us. It's not good for the community when it grows. But I agree, early stage is brilliant. The environment's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you very much for that. I'm afraid we've run out of time. So thank you again very much for coming along today, and thanks for listening in and for your questions. And that's all from us. Thank you very much.